Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course that makes this Circles and Squares, episode number 19. And Kate, we just watched the Game Awards. Pretty good show, right?
Yeah, I was super excited. I was so concerned I had to actually watch it a day late because when the Game Awards started, I had to go write a 3-hour exam.
That's the worst
And
timing.
it was horrible. I can't believe my prof did that. Like, how
How could
did
they
he
plan
not
an exam during the
realize?
Game Awards? Like, how
Right? Like, does he
inconsiderate.
not know? I thought he was a nice guy, but like
Obviously
reconsidering,
not,
but
obviously not.
obviously not. So, but I was so excited. I was so concerned the whole time about getting things spoiled, and I actually managed to make it to like watching it the following evening with literally not a single thing spoiled.
I'm absolutely blown away by that, considering also, spoiler alert, that Sephiroth was announced for fucking Super Smash Bros. And you avoided spoilers? Like, holy
You
crap.
know what? You know what it was? I didn't have any kind of, like, social media open at all. Like,
That's impressive.
it would have been game over had I opened basically anything and also not told everyone who I know would be watching to, like, "Don't talk to me about it yet." I took all the precautions and, like, oh man, it was so worth it. That trailer was awesome.
It was. It was. Well, we'll talk about that in a bit because today we have a pretty jam-packed show for everyone out there. We're starting off, of course, with the games that we've been playing over the past couple of weeks, which I guess is a PS Plus special because technically all three of these games have been available for free on PS Plus. So we'll
Mhm.
start off with those. Then we'll move into the news segment, which is going to be featured on the Game Awards. We're going to just go over Game of the Year award and some of our favorite announcements that we saw during the show. And then, as a special segment for the end, we did a listener mail question last episode about our thoughts on Pokemon over the last decade. And, you know, we're big Pokemon fans. We love the franchise. And we thought, as a special treat, we would have our first ever guest on Circles and Squares, the one and only Michael, who actually wrote in that question and is a really good personal friend of ours. So we can't wait to chat to him about Pokemon. But before we get into that, I just wanted to remind everyone as well that if you want to be cool like Mike and write us some listener mail, you can do that by sending it to circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com, and we will read it on the show. We'll answer it. And if your question is good enough, maybe one day you too can be a guest. But before we get into that, Kate, why don't we talk a bit about Bugsnax?
Oh, this was a big game for everyone. Being the second exclusive PlayStation 5 only game, we had to give Bugsnax a try.
We did, yeah. I mean, it's funny because to me this game was a lot like an Untitled Goose Game kind of vibe in terms of like it's a silly kind of cult game in a way, you know, and I feel like this game was really hyped up going into it by social media and like the funny memes and kind of the the mystery of like what is this game? Like, is it a horror game?
Yeah.
Is it not?
This
And
this game, yeah, it had the weirdest build up because at first it got shown off and everyone's like, "Well, that's just some dumb kids game. I don't care about Bugsnax." And then because of that, it had a weird trailer and it just sort of like took off as this weird internet meme where it was like, and I got full on board thinking like this is gonna be a horror game. Like, yeah, like 5 hours in and they're just gonna hit you with some really fucked up stuff and like
yeah,
I'm totally on board for this existential horror that is Bugsnax. But
yeah,
but
well,
then the game came out and reviews started and, like, people were, like, unironically praising it, and it apparently, according to, like, almost any reviewer, it's an amazing game.
yeah, I mean, I it's a weird game for me. I feel like I've started it. I've had it since obviously the beginning of having my PS5, and I've played it probably
Mhm,
a total of 5 or 6 times, kind of off and on. And it's one of those
mhm.
games that every time I start it, I have a different opinion on it. What like the first time I played it, I don't know if it was the PS5 hype or what, but I was actually kind of impressed because my expectations were pretty low just based on it not
Mhm.
really, I'm not really into that whole kind of meme humor type thing. So I was kind of impressed at the start, and then I kind of went through a lull with it, and like this isn't for me. And then I played it a couple days ago again, just in preparation for this episode, and I was actually a bit higher on it again too. So I
Hmm.
still don't really know what my final thoughts on it would be. I don't know if you've had. I'm guessing you sound like you're not really in love with it.
You know what it was? And I I feel like the game is really close to being something I like, but it just falls short. And I think the problem is that the gameplay itself is actually pretty decent. Like at its core, it's very much kind of like people are compared to like Pokemon Snap and like you know what it's one of those things where it's really close to being something I think I would enjoy, but it just falls a little bit short. And like at its core, the gameplay is pretty decent. It's kind of like a puzzle game more than anything else.
It's a lot. It's
And
really puzzle focused. So, like you're basically going around collecting different bugs, and the crux is that you catch each one in a different way. So you'll have a different puzzle, like miniature puzzle to solve to collect them all. And I found that the puzzle mechanics are kind of interesting to figure out.
Yeah, exactly. And then like as you progress, you get different tools that let you then solve puzzles in different ways. And some of those tools can be like connected. And there's things like, you'll see a bug early on, but it's flying in the air and you don't have a way of reaching it or catching it. So you have to come back later once you've got new equipment. And it's like it's kind of got like a decent progression. The puzzles are quite decent. Like it's legitimately like relatively like I would call it successful at what it's trying to be. My big problem with it is that I don't have a high level of engagement with it. Like, for fun context, I played it, like passing the controller on the couch with a couple people, and we'd had a couple drinks at this point. So that's how we went into Bugsnax, kind of like we're gonna have a laugh and like this is gonna
Yeah,
be
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
And for an hour and a half, it was. Like we, like Bunger, 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 like cracked us up. We couldn't believe
Shout out to
that was a
Bunger,
thing.
man, the best bug snack.
Yeah, yeah, shout out to Bunger, and, like, when you first catch the first bug and it, like, says its name through your controller in some, like, strawberry, like, voice, like, we cracked up, like, that was hilarious, and, like, the first thing we did when we got the slingshot was slingshot the villagers in the face, and their face gets covered in ketchup, and we're like, "Yeah," like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what we wanted. So, like, it was fun, but the problem is after that, like, novelty had kinda worn off of playing Bugsnax for an hour and a half, all you're left with is like the bug catching and the gameplay, which like I said, I think is not bad. I think it's good at what it does, but like it just doesn't I'm not gripped to play. And I feel like first of all, my biggest problem with this game, and like it sounds kind of superficial, but I think it makes a big difference, is the game looks bad visually.
It does, especially when you're going onto a new console like the PS5. Like it's almost like you want to experience something really new and fresh. Like you're starting up
Yeah,
Demon Souls, you're starting up Miles Morales, you're starting up whatever
yeah,
other first gen game
and,
you
like,
or
even
you know.
Astrobot that came with a console that's kind of like, like, I can for us, like, buying it early and getting the PS Plus, like, Bugsnax and Astrobots were kind of like the 2 free PS5 games we got, right?
Yeah.
And Astro looks phenomenal. It is a gorgeous game. Meanwhile, Bugsnax looks like it's a PS3 game.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean, and I don't think like the game's
Right?
obviously not going to be a graphical powerhouse. I think you hit on something really important, like with my opinion too, is you when you said I'm just not compelled to play it, and I
Yeah.
think that what it comes down to for me is that it's not. If it was like reskinned in a way, like even if we're going to talk about Pokemon later, if this was, and you mentioned Pokemon Snap, if this was if this exact game was just reskinned Pokemon and called Pokemon like Hunt 'em All or something,
Pokemon snacks? Oh, don't eat your
I would be
Pokemon.
down to go and capture like all of them, right? Because it's fun enough if you like the subject matter, but I'm not attached to Bugsnax. I don't the jokes are getting kind of old now. There's only so many puns you can make on like food monsters, you know. And
Mhm.
although it's kind of interesting to work out the puzzles, like okay, if I squirt this bug snack with some ranch dressing, then this other one will become attracted to it and run into it and knock it over, and then
Don't
I can catch it in my net. You know, it's that kind of thing, and it's fun to work it out. But I just
Yeah.
find the actual like physical controlling of the game, it doesn't feel very good to me, and you know.
Yes. I
It's only
agree.
half the battle to figure out the puzzle. The other half is it has to feel good to do it, and I really don't
Yeah,
think it feels good.
exactly, and I think that's where I bring up visuals, is I feel like if this game had been like a Pixar kind of like a really pretty or like nice to look at world, and then there was like better sound design, and when you caught a bug there was like a really good fanfare, I think that would be compelling enough for me to play, just because it would be really wholesome to kind of like, like look at all the bugs and like just kind of like even be in the world. I think that would be enough because I feel like the gameplay's good enough, but it's not the selling point, so it needs something to kind of drive it, and I feel like if the game was just, like, pretty to look at and, like, fun to move around in, that would be
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
all it needs to kind of elevate it just to that, like, one step it's missing to being kind of, like, engaging or interesting to play, but it
Yeah.
just doesn't quite like, it's at the top of the stairs, but isn't quite taking that last step to, like,
But
"I
is it
will
gonna
play
fall
it."
down? Is it gonna fall
But,
down the stairs, or is it gonna get
I don't
back
know,
to the top?
it might bunger all the way back down.
So I gotta ask you too, before we move to our next games too, just what you think kind of the story and the vibe of it overall. Because to me, another part that I'm not a huge fan of is, like you said, the look. But specifically, I find the characters to be a little bit like uncanny valley-ish. But I think the story actually is one of the more interesting parts of the game. Like the characters seem actually quite fleshed out, and I'm sure if you were to get further, they seem to have like interconnected relationships. And there's if you go into each of their little files in your diary, it'll say, this person doesn't like this character but loves this character, for example. So you kind of
Mhm.
have like little story beats between the different villagers, and I guess the story is that you're a journalist and you're going to this Bugsnax island to investigate a missing persons kind of report.
Yeah.
And along the way you're kind of doing quests for the different inhabitants of the island, and then once you do enough you can interview them and kind of gain some clues as to what might have gone on in the larger story as you kind of rebuild this town. And so it's an interesting concept. I just wish, yeah, like keeps coming back to, I just wish it was presented a little differently.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too is like the story seems like it's good. Like from everything I've read, like people are just praising it. Like the characters are really well written, and like you don't expect this game to like deal with heavy subjects like depression and like being
Which is
like
true.
trapped in a relationship and like that's awesome. Like it's really I think it's fantastic that apparently it's succeeding at that. But the problem is that you don't get that right off the bat. Like that's something that like the game will take time to build up, and that's fine because it probably feels a lot more natural and like having it kind of be like a slow burn. But the problem is it's just like it's not a hook at the beginning to keep you playing.
Yeah, yeah. I guess this, like, to summarize how I feel, I'm glad I got this on PS Plus. I've kind of went up and down, like I said. I don't think I'm ever gonna finish this or really play too much more.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a free PS Plus game coming through, and it's
Yeah,
another thing on
exactly.
the plate for the PS5 to dip into once in a while. Like it's not bad by any means, and I think a lot of people obviously like it, so it's good. I think it's just
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a great game and like honestly it would be a fantastic kids game. Like,
oh yeah.
memes and jokes aside, it is a great kids game and I think it's one of those ones that it probably sounds kind of condescending, but my stance on it has been if I was really sick at stuck at home, I would play this game as like, oh, I just want to like be a vegetable on the couch for like a couple hours because I'm
A
sick.
vegetable because of bug
A
snacks.
vegetable, the carrot. So yeah,
Cool.
yeah. We'll see. Maybe one day we'll report back on we beat Bugsnax, but don't hold your breath.
Okay, well, speaking of games that were free on PS Plus, you and I both picked one of the December PS Plus games to, cover for the show here. So I would like to go first and tell you that I was lucky enough to pick Just Cause 4, or
Mhm.
potentially I could say unlucky enough. Um, I don't know what it is. I really hate coming on this show and having bad things to say about games. Like I always want to have the positive opinion, give it the bright spin, and people put a lot of
Right.
hours into making these games. It's developers are people, and I don't want
Yeah,
to
exactly. And
bash their
at the end of the day we're here to like celebrate our love for video games, right? We want to enjoy the media that we're spending our time in. But
That's right.
not
With
every game is going to be a masterpiece.
No, and with that being said, I've got to tell you just like how shockingly disappointed I am with Just Cause 4. Um, this is a series that I do not have any experience with really, and it's been one of those that I know there's like a lot of cult following to Just Cause, and people love the big sandbox nature of like you can travel around a lot of ways. I think in one of them there was like a hurricane kind of thing. You could fly in the sky. You get a wingsuit. You get all kinds of
Mhm.
movement options. And it's one of those games that not everyone's played, but people have heard, and it's still a AAA title, big game. But man, I can't believe, first of all, like this game looks. I'm not kidding. It looks closer to a PS3 game than it does a PS5 game. Of course, it is a PS4 game, I should say, on PS Plus. This is all
Right.
confusing now, but
Right.
but
It's
it,
not new like Bugsnax, but
no, and I mean, I want to get some positivity out of the way first. Like there is
right.
some really cool things in this game in terms of mobility, and I think that they really focused a lot of their attention when they were making this to make it as cool to move around as possible, because you have a lot of different options right from the
Mhm.
start too. That you have this kind of combination of three different abilities, which is a parachute, so you can obviously use that to kind of glide, and you've got a grapple
Mhm.
hook, which you can use to obviously kind of zip around and get up to high to reach places. And then you also have a wingsuit, which allows you to glide, kind of like a paraglider. And so all three of those in
Mhm.
combination, you can actually move around in some pretty cool ways. Like you can latch onto a building that's really high up on the top, and just as you get to the top of the building, you let go of your grapple and then use the wingsuit, and all of a sudden you're gliding around, and it actually is pretty fun to move. But the problem is that everything else is not up to the standard of what I would have wanted.
Right.
The it just
Just a sigh is all you
the
need to say.
yeah, like the graphics, I actually did some reading on this too. Apparently one of the big problems, like, this game was not as well received as Just Cause 3, and apparently a lot of people say that it actually looks worse than Just Cause 3. And I don't know if they maybe increased the scope. Like, the map is pretty large in this game, so maybe they just went for like quantity over quality almost, but it just looks like
Mhm.
the textures are not high quality in any way. And I was pretty shocked to look at that. And so it's other things too, like the feeling of these guns. Like, you don't feel like there's any kind of weight or pop to them. Like,
Mhm.
I think it's something that I come back to a lot. And just talking about games more and more on this show, I've come to realize, like, when it comes to shooters, I really appreciate shooters that have very heavy guns and they're tactile and you can feel each bullet coming out, and your shots have meaning. And in this game, they just don't have that. It's one
Mhm.
of I'll be shooting and it's like, well, did I hit that guy? Would I have known I hit him if I didn't see his health bar going down? The explosions just don't really do much. Like, it just is very
It's probably
underwhelming in
very
that way.
shallow,
It
maybe?
is,
It can
yeah,
feel
yeah.
shallow to play?
And the game kind of does this thing where you play this tutorial mission. You're kind of scaling these wintry hills. By the way, I clipped through a wall by accident while I was using the grappling hook on that mission, and I got stuck. I had to reset. So that was
No,
great.
you got stuck in the wall?
Yeah, I got stuck in a wall through the grappling
Amazing.
hook, so that was weird. And then the game does this thing after the tutorial mission where it takes all your powers away from you, kind of like a Metroid. And I was like, wow,
Okay.
this is interesting. I guess they're gonna take these away. That's kind of cool. You got to go work and get them back, right?
Mhm.
But then in the next mission, you literally walk up, start the first story mission, and all of a sudden you just have all your power ups again after your
Oh,
character had
so
been like
why did
kind
they
of,
take them away?
yeah, he was kind of knocked out and like take all the powers away. And at first I was
Right.
like, well, it's cool narratively, but then also it's like, well, the fun part of this game is the movement. So if you take it all away, I don't want to play this at all. And then they gave it back, and on one hand I was like, well, this is great because now I at least have this movement to play with. But then why even take it away? It like to immediately give them all back. It was just really weird.
There was no reason, they did it just 'cause.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, the other stuff going on is it's like a big story kind of thing. I don't know the backstory of Just Cause. I haven't really taken much
Right,
time
you're
to
not a
research that.
connoisseur,
No,
clearly.
no, but I mean, it just, from what I played, it seems so contrived. Like, you're taking down this big evil organization, and then you kind of crash land after this big fight, and you're in this kind of impoverished favela kind of town, and you know there's a contact there, so you
Oh,
walk up to her and she's gonna help you. And then all of a sudden you find out, like, the villain shows up, you get in a fight, and then, oh, it just so happens the guy trying to kill you is her father. And there's
ah,
they don't really leave a
surprise.
lot of like mystery. They kind of just tell you all these things off the bat, and it's
Yeah.
it's kind of the stereotypical sort of action plot. um so I mean,
Yeah,
it just doesn't draw me in.
yeah, I think that's fair. The impression I always got from those games, and to be fair, like, I will say I never really, looked into them, or it didn't really pique my interest, but the impression they always gave me were they were kind of just like not like it I don't wanna compare it too much to GTA, because I think, like, GTA is a it's got really good writing and the story is very important, and there's a lot of other aspects to GTA. But it always kinda struck me in the way that, like, it's just kind of like a sandbox for people to, like, spend time in the world and kind of, like, dick around in, and, like, the selling point is the world, and then they just kind of fill it with a story because the game needs a story and, like, like, missions for you to do,
Yeah,
but, like,
yeah.
everything you kind of see online in this game is always like, I tied, like, 30 rockets to this goat and it, like, spun around
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the air, and,
totally.
like, just kind of silly stuff like that, and I think that's fine because, like, it's like a fun sandbox for people to play around in, but
Yeah, and those are
if
really
you're not really
popular
into
too.
that kind of stuff, then it's sort of, it's not really what you're looking for if you want a more story-focused kind of game, at least from what I've seen. It
Yeah,
might
no,
be.
you're bang on with that point too. Like, people that love that kind of sandbox, like, if you buy GTA, not to go through the story, but to kind of, you see how many police you can get after you, and escape
Mhm.
them, and or try crazy experiments, like, yeah, tethering this bomb to this guy and see if you can blow him up into the sky or something. You'd have a good time with that. But I mean, if you're looking for a story narrative driven, like, mechanically fun to play kind of third person action experience, this is probably somewhere you'd not want to look.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that. Kate, why don't you tell me about your game?
Well, I would absolutely love to be able to interject some positivity into our our latest PS Plus adventures, but unfortunately, I just can't, in good consciousness, recommend Worms Rumble.
That's really disappointing.
uh,
I have a soft spot for worms.
yeah, and part of the problem might have been my expectations going into it, because I was, I had this positive memory of like, some classic Worms with the turn-based combat and all the funny guns and, the ridiculous situations that would happen. And Worms Rumble, I guess, tries to embody a little bit of that, but it is a very different game. And I feel like it's just sort of taken what was unique or like what stood out about Worms and is just kind of like boiled it
Hmm.
into a very generic and like soulless game.
Oh God,
um
this is worse than
I
Just
mean,
Cause 4.
maybe that's harsh, but so basically now, if you haven't been keeping up with Worms, it's now no longer the old turn-based Worm strategy where you'd play like couch co-op. It's online only. Um,
Oh, there's no local.
there's no local,
Wow, that's surprising.
which I was disappointed with because that's how I was hoping to play it. But no, it's online only. You queue up for a death match, and then if you play enough deathmatch games, you unlock being able to play like a team squad or like a single elimination style.
Hmm.
Um, and it's so now it's on like a 2D map still, but you move in real time. Like you can move left and right, and like you can jump and kind of go up and
Yeah,
down. Um, and it's a shooter, and like the map was just really generic, kind of like facility building. The worms do not feel great to control in
yeah.
any sense.
I was gonna ask you about that because that's the one thing about Worms is that I don't think it's ever really felt great to control any Worms game really. And so I was kind of
Mhm.
was my main concern going into this one is like how are they going to make it feel good in an action sense because it's not even
Yeah,
turn based, right?
it doesn't feel like an action at all. So the worms basically move the exact same as I remember them. They're very sluggish, very slow, which doesn't lend itself very well to an action game because you want to be able to traverse the map. And if you kill someone on the left side of the map and everyone else is on the right side, you want to get there pretty quickly to like
Yeah, yeah,
continue
of
the
course.
action. And like also too, it's like, all right, you see some other guy, but like, you're kind of like slowly encroaching and like working your way towards him and he sees you and he's like, all right, I'm gonna slowly work my way towards you. And like
It
there's
builds
so
the
much kind of
suspense.
like yeah, but it's like it's weird because the whole game is still centered around like the wacky worms guns that are ridiculous and over the top. So like it very much feels like it wants to be an arcade shooter that's like, constant action. Like this is so silly and like but yeah, so, like, you still all of the wacky, like, action go, go, go of, like, you got a rocket launcher, now you've got a banana grenade, and it's ridiculous and silly, but then it's, like, combined with, the incredibly slow and sluggish actual, like, movement options that you have to traverse the map, and it just doesn't feel great. Like, the weapons are fine, there's nothing wrong with them, the shooting is okay, it actually uses the triggers, which I thought was kinda fun
Mm.
to shoot your guns. There's a little bit of like feedback there from the controller, but the actual like game itself is, it doesn't really give you
Is
much in
is there
terms
any
of
kind of
like
single player or anything like that, or is it strictly just like online
it's
versus?
strictly online.
Okay.
So it boots you right into the action immediately. And I just it just did nothing to me. And I think the problem is like the comedy didn't really come through either. So it's just sort of like a really generic like flash action game,
Hmm.
I guess is how it feels. And the problem is there's so many like multiplayer shooters right now that it's just hard to ever I don't see why you would pick this over anything else.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
and it shot itself in the foot or I guess in like the tail
In
part
the
of the worm. Cuz like it came out in the same PS Plus collection as Rocket League,
right,
which
yeah. I mean, not every
I
it's they're
think
very different, right? But
they are very different, but I think if you want, like, an arcadey kind of action shooter, Rocket League is a great pick. I think that game, it felt really
no,
good to
you
play, it was a
Rocket
lot of
Arena, Kate.
fun, like
Rocket Arena.
Rocket
Rocket
Arena,
Arena.
sorry, yeah, Rocket League is the cars, yeah, maybe not quite similar to words.
I was gonna say.
Sorry, Rocket Arena, you're right, thank you. Like, it's different, it's got, like, some different game modes and it's obviously not quite the same, but it if you want an arcade shooter, like, that game is quite fun and compelling to play, and I think it's a lot more interesting, like, it has a clear identity versus something like this that, like, I feel like maybe would have been it still feels like it's a Flash game from 2000.
Yeah, and to me it seems like they kind of went halfway. It's like they wanted to make an action game, and they did, but they didn't change the mechanics enough to reflect that. Like they kept too much of the old Worms feel when they should have just maybe been like, you know what, screw it, let's just remake this whole franchise into something else.
Yeah, I agree, like, I feel like they should have just leaned into something to give an identity, like, okay, it's Worms, like, it's known for being silly, like, maybe lean into the humor a little bit more, or, make it over the top in a little bit more of an interesting way, but it just seems like, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna make a Worms game," like, shooters are really popular now, right? Like, okay, maybe it's a shooter now, but they didn't really, like it doesn't seem like they had a very clear or, like, organic plan for how they wanted to execute that. It's just, "Well, here's
Mm-hmm.
a shooter. I heard you guys like these." Um,
Yeah. Too
so I
bad.
don't know. I mean, it's free. Like it's worth maybe playing a game or two. But I don't see what's there to really like hold you in the same way that other
Yeah, yeah,
shooters are. Like
yeah.
I have a really big skill cap, or like we have some really interesting like characters that you can play as that have different abilities, or like something that makes them stand out. This is just very much like I'll
Mm-hmm.
have
Mm-hmm.
forgotten it ever existed in a couple weeks.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Damn, that's too bad. We had a unfortunate PS Plus. I feel like usually at least one of us gets a game we like a decent amount, you know.
Yeah,
So
and I think the difference is here in this one is that we intentionally didn't play Rocket Arena because we'd already played it, and
that's
I
right.
think
Yeah,
we would have picked that game probably otherwise and had a good time with it. So
yeah,
that's
that's
the
fair. That's
saving
true.
grace of PS Plus is play Rocket Arena. It's quite fun.
Well, the other saving grace of PS Plus is, of course, that we will get some new games for January coming up pretty quick, also. So let's just cross our fingers for that, okay? But
Mhm.
why don't we take a quick break, Kate, and we'll be right back afterwards to discuss the Game Awards, Game of the Year winner, and some of our favorite announcements. So we'll be right back. All right, everyone, we are back for the second part of the show where we're going to be talking about the results from the Game Awards a couple days ago. 2020 Game Awards came and went. Jeff Keighley had a cool stage. Damn, it looked good, right?
Yeah, it always looks really good. Although he did get trapped in that like the D20 a few times.
Yeah, a few times, but I mean, all in all, I'm surprised just how flawlessly the show went, considering it. I mean, how much of an undertaking it must have been to do completely like remote for the most part, and with COVID going on and everything, obviously it's changed their setup a lot. So I was blown away by the
Yeah,
overall
it
presentation.
was really smooth and very impressive. Like it
Yeah.
didn't feel like this was the kind of like plan B alternative. This felt like it could have very much just been how the show was intended to work.
Yeah, I think it even was maybe even my favorite Game Awards ever in terms of its format, just because, I mean, it's always a long show, but I think this one actually had maybe even a bit of a better pacing just because you didn't have to pause and wait for people to walk up from the crowd and
And
transition like
clap
what's
and
kind of
like
on stage and stuff. Like it was actually pretty streamlined as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, that's a fair assessment. It definitely made for kind of being like an audience a little bit like yeah, a little bit quicker, a little bit less downtime between things.
Yeah, and plus we had Whooper Watch for all you
Oh my
Pokemon
god, I
Go fans
can't
out there.
believe I missed Whooper Watch. That was the thing we laughed about the most because obviously, like I mentioned earlier, watched it a day late, so all the things that are like, "You can do this, vote right now or do something right now," obviously were not
Yeah.
possible. But they just it became a joke, they brought up Whooper Watch, and we're like, "Oh, fuck, I can't believe we missed that," and then, like, an hour later, they're like, "Oh my god, Whooper Watch is back," and we're like, "Ah."
Yeah. Not to bash
Strike a
Pokemon Go
twine
or anything. Not to bash it or anything, but I mean that poor girl that just had to her job was to like announce the Whooper watches and stuff. I just felt so bad for her.
Just made me laugh. It's like, well, I wonder why they picked Wooper. Like, it just seemed like such a weird, arbitrary Pokemon.
I know. Anyway, Kate, let's go over some of the announcements here. We're not going to go over all the winners for all the different awards and whatnot, but we will say like congratulations to The Last of Us Part 2, winner of Game of the Year 2020. I think it was the winner of our best PlayStation exclusive bracket we did earlier in the show
It
as
did,
well. So
yeah.
we
So
obviously made a good
we're
choice.
clairvoyant,
That's
perhaps
right.
you
That's
could
right.
say.
Congratulations to The Last of Us. It also won Best Game Direction. It won Best Narrative. Of course, we had a lot of other winners too. Tsushima won Art Direction, and Final
Mhm,
Fantasy won the Best Score for Original Music. So good for those
mhm.
guys. And yeah, go check out the full list of winners. I think, I mean, as many awards as The Last of Us won, I think it actually was fairly diverse in a lot of the winners. So yeah, congratulations to everyone, really. Kate, there was a lot of announcements though during the Game Awards as well. Any that really stuck out for you?
Well, I will say that Elden Ring was not announced, so
Mm-hmm.
we'll get that out of the way. There was no Elden Ring news, even though Jeff Keighley tweeted "ooh" for us on Twitter ahead of time, and then he let us down. Um, so after coming to terms with that, I will say there were a few things that the Sephiroth for Smash reveal was probably the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, what an announcement! Hey,
Um,
I can't believe like
it
first
was
it's surprising because they already had Cloud. You figured, well, you already got their Final Fantasy representation. There's only so many character slots, but having someone as huge as Sephiroth come into the game also alongside Cloud is I was blown away.
Yeah, and I it was a nuts trailer too. Like, don't just read an article or like see it pop up on Reddit. Like, go watch the trailer. It was pretty cool. It was very edge. Is exactly how it should be. Um, but
Absolutely. And while
yeah.
we're on the topic of big characters too, we got to mention Master Chief in Fortnite also. I know Fortnite's not
Mhm.
like the biggest thing for us as a show, but and especially since Chief's an Xbox character, but just the magnitude of having Chief alongside Kratos alongside all these other characters in Fortnite is huge, I
Yeah,
think.
I think it's fantastic. And the little short they did for it too with the red blue was actually like pretty well done. Like,
It was. They
was
put their care into those things.
for sure, like, as much as, people hate on Fortnite for, whatever various reasons, like, it is a well-crafted, high-quality game, and, like, you can see the love that gets put into it. So,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
whether it's your cup of tea or not, it's definitely, like, something that I think deserves a lot of respect and praise for how it presents itself, so, yeah, that was awesome.
I agree.
Um, I know the other big thing that stood out to both of us was the Disco Elysium,
Oh man,
um,
I put out a tweet just before the Game Awards started, and I was just like, if either of these three things happen, this is what I want to see. And it was Disco Elysium for console. It was a what else did I put on there? I don't even
I
remember.
think you need
There's
to put a new Phoenix, right?
new Phoenix Wright game. That's right. And the other one I think was a Crimson Skies reboot. Or I mean,
That's
I love
right.
Crimson
I mean,
Skies.
there
That'd
was
be
that
nice,
there
but
was that dragon dog fight thing, which, like,
yeah,
yeah, that's
but
close
I mean,
enough.
Disco Elysium coming to console. I've been waiting for. I mean,
Yeah.
I should have bought this on PC. Honestly, this is like one of my most anticipated games that's already out that I haven't played yet, and I can't believe I've had the willpower not to get it on PC. To be honest with you, I'm just worried like my computer wouldn't run it properly, and I want to have the best experience. So absolutely, you best believe I'm buying that day one when it comes out, and I just
Mhm.
can't wait to try out the depth and go through the story of that
I
game. And
agree, like, the game is so ambitious, like, I've been wanting to play it for so long too, and I'm glad I didn't because I think this version also is, like, gonna include some new quests and, like, a little bit of new content as well as, like, coming to console. So I'm glad I waited because now I can kind of experience, like, the complete game, I guess, as opposed to, like, "Oh, do I replay for the new content?" Or, like, "Is it worth it?"
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But, like, it is definitely like, it's such an ambitious game, and it's been on my radar for so long, like, I'm just concerned. I think the main reason I haven't started it yet is because it just seems like such a huge commitment.
Yeah, it does. It's
Like, it
definitely
just
a
seems like
dense game. Like
yeah,
you
it
couldn't
seems like
casually play Disco Elysium. I don't think.
yeah, exactly. It seems like the kinda game it's like, if you don't play for, like, you have to play at least every second day for, like, a minimum 3 hours, and, like, you have to think about it on your spare
Yeah.
time wherever possible, and, like, it just
Well,
seems like a life-consuming kind of game, and, like, that's exactly what I want from it. I just need to be ready to commit that time.
I'd also like to shout out to change gears here, Season, which was revealed from Scavenger Studios. It was the one that
Mhm.
kind of looked like a Ghibli movie, and the girl had those cool reflective sunglasses, and you're kind of going around this storybook looking world. And I don't know if she's like a photographer, I guess, and she's kind of trying to make memories and whatnot. But the whole art style just really sucked me in, and I'm really interested to see what this game ends up being and learn more about it for
Yeah.
sure.
You know what it really reminded me of? I don't know if you've heard of the game Gris. It
Oh
was
yeah,
another
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of one of those, like, art it's kind of like more of like a puzzle platformer kind of thing, but the art really reminded me of that game. It had a kinda similar kind of atmosphere, so play that in the meantime maybe. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
good.
I gotta ask you, what do you think of Crimson Desert? Because that was the game that's coming out of South Korea. That I think it's from a new developer, at least new for the West for here. And it kind of started off looking like a Skyrim esque fantasy thing that I wasn't really interested in, and I still don't know if I'd play it just because I'm not really into that medieval fantasy thing a lot of the time. But I was really impressed with how this game looked, and the combat looked interesting, and it had some kind of mystical elements in there as well. And I just am interested almost to follow this game.
It genuinely looks really cool, like, and there was a lot shown off, like, and it said it in the trailer too, like, this is all, like, captured in-game footage, and they
Hmm
showed off a lot, like, I was surprised that the expected release date was so far in the future because it seemed like they had so much to show off. Like this game must almost be done. It looked quite impressive. The combat was hilarious. Like it looks like it looks good, but it cracked me up in the sense that there was like a lot of like weapon and like hand to hand combat, but then also there's just some like wrestling moves thrown in. They're like, like two slashes of the sword into suplex is not like
I mean,
a
that's a new
button
fighting
combo I
style.
ever would have guessed.
That's
But
right up
like
there with like ninjutsu and
like I'm all on board for it. So yeah. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the assumption it's connected to Black Desert and this is like a
Oh, is
sequel
it?
of
I
sort.
didn't know that. Okay, maybe it is.
I don't know, like, that was just my
Yeah, you know what?
guess
You might
because
be right about
Black
that.
Desert and it looked kind of similar in, like, the way that that game was also, like, a visual spectacle kind of thing.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
the trailer itself didn't really give me huge MMO vibes, it gave me more of, like, a Dragon Age or, like, one of
Yeah,
those kind of
yeah.
games,
I don't think
but,
it's an
like
MMO. I think it might be like a single player adventure. Maybe it is
yeah.
based off Black Desert, but it's like the single player version
Yeah,
or something.
we'll see. It does look interesting. The only other game I kind of made a big mental note, and I think a lot of the games this year were like a lot of shooters and zombies and like
A lot of zombies, yeah, a
those
lot of
kind of things.
zombies.
Which, like, for me, they're the kind of games that like if I have the three friends who are wanting to play, and they're like, "Hey, Katie, we need a fourth. We really want you to play with us." I would have a good time, but I would never be the one to sort of like start that conversation.
Mhm, mhm.
But what stood out to me and I'm really excited for is the new League of Legends game.
Oh, right on, yeah.
Um, yeah, we all know that I don't really play anymore, but I still follow it to a degree. And they've got this new game coming out, and it seems like it's a kind of like a turn-based strategy in the battles, but then it looks like it's kind of got an overworld you can run around in, like almost kind of like Baldur's Gate or Divinity sort of style, and then when you
Yeah.
get into combat, it switches to turn-based, and I don't know if they showed this off or if they had said something in the past or if I've just made it totally up in my mind, but I seem to think it's like a multiplayer, kind of like you can do the story like co-op
Right, yeah.
maybe, but it generally looks like it has a lot of potential, and I know Riot definitely has the resources to put in and make it a good game. And like Runeterra, their card game came out and it was fantastic, and Valorant, their shooter's doing really well. So I have high expectations that they've really made
Yeah.
the like effort to put in a lot of quality to this game, and it generally looks like it could be something really unique and interesting, despite if you're a fan of League of Legends or not.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I mean, I probably wouldn't play it, but I mean, I like the way that they're kind of diversifying their portfolio a little bit at Riot and not just sticking with League. You know, they're kind of expanding that universe into different games. So I like that a lot, especially for someone like you that probably wants to you're invested in the world, but you don't play a lot of League anymore specifically. So it's a nice excuse to kind of still be involved.
Yeah, exactly. It's cool for me because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, that's, like, one of my favorite characters," but, like, like, I'm done with that game, but it's cool I can now bring that character somewhere else and experience them, and it like, the game obviously has to stand on its own 2 feet and not rely on the connection, but it is just a cool bonus for someone who's, already got, like, some level of engagement.
Yeah, totally,
So
totally. I'd like to shout out just quickly too the Perfect Dark announcement of the reboot of I think it's by the Initiative, right? The new Perfect Dark. I didn't know what it was when the trailer first started, but I know it's Perfect Dark is like a huge cult kind of classic game back from what the early 2000s or the late 90s or something. I think it was on N64, right?
mhm,
So pretty old game there, but
mhm.
that's a cool exclusive for Microsoft to get for sure. So shout out to that. And the last thing I wanted to mention too was the trailer for Mass Effect at the end. Just the confirmation, they're still thinking about that
Right.
universe after Andromeda, which was clearly like a big step down from the original trilogy. So I'm just really hoping that whatever this turns into, first of all, that it actually comes out. Because you never know, right? You never know. The stuff gets canceled all the time, and
Right, and
and
it's also ambitious. I think they said they're also working on a Dragon Age at the same time.
yeah, I mean they got a couple
So
teams over there, I think, but I mean,
yeah, definitely, but just those are 2 really big IPs, like, they wouldn't necessarily, like, have to work on them concurrently, and, like,
yeah, yeah, that's true. But
so
I
I
mean,
think,
either
like,
way,
seeing
just
Dragon Age, no one would have expected to also see a Mass Effect at the same,
yeah,
game
yeah,
show, but yeah, that's awesome.
that's for sure. Yeah, so I mean, whenever that comes out, 2026, I'm looking forward to you, Mass Effect.
2026. Well, I mean, what? Cyberpunk was supposed to come out in
Well,
2013, so
that's the thing, right?
like
You can never get your hopes up too high for these, like, because I mean, there
yeah.
was no gameplay. It was very much just like, here's 30 seconds of space, and then we're gonna show a character's face for two
Yeah,
seconds, and
exactly. This
and
is
whatever.
basically just confirmation that the game exists, get excited.
Yeah, exactly. So I am
You know.
excited, but I'll look forward to the remastered trilogy first, and then maybe this in the future. We'll see. Unless you got anything else, Kate, I think that's gonna close us out for the Game Awards, though. Yeah, I mean, it's
Um,
a good show. I just want to summarize. Like, it was a good show. Can you believe Vin Diesel was in it?
oh my god, I was yeah. You know what, that's was one of those, like, I just gotten up to, like, go get a new drink or whatever. I had stepped away and I came back and, everyone's like, "Look, there's Vin Diesel," and I'm like, "That's not really Vin Diesel, like, why the fuck is he here?" Like, "That is Vin Diesel."
You know what's so funny is when that trailer started up, it had a really hard Horizon Zero Dawn vibe, especially
It
like that
did.
that younger girl who was with him. I guess it's probably his daughter, and I've never played the original arc, so maybe this is a well-known character or something. But she looks a lot like Aloy, and like the face paint they have is reminiscent of, like,
Yeah,
this
the
could be
blue
Horizon.
paint,
So
and
I
then
was like, wow, is Vin Diesel joining Horizon 2? Like, this is crazy.
yeah, it was a wild ride, and then they, like, went through that cave and they got to, like, the next bit, where there were those, like, kinda pterodactyl
Hmm.
things that, like, jumped off, and it showed, like, the landscape around. We're like, "Oh my god, no, it's Avatar," because I'm pretty sure that's, like, a scene kind of, like, ripped from the movie where, like, they go along that, like, walkway and the birds jump down and it, like, pans up to all the, like, floating islands. We're like, "Oh, no, it's not Horizon, it's Avatar." And then,
Yeah,
like,
and no, it's
kept
actually
going. We're
Arc
like,
2.
"Is Vin Diesel was Vin Diesel an actor in Avatar?" Like, no,
Hey, Vin
we
Diesel's
were wrong.
the facial capture in Arc 2 was nuts.
It
It
was
looked
really good.
just like Vin Diesel. Wow.
It did, and it sounded just like him too.
Whoever they got to be his voice actor was just amazing.
Right? Yes, this is very, very impressive.
All right, Kate. Well, let's say goodbye to Vin Diesel and take a quick break, and we'll be joined after the break by our good friend Michael to talk all about Pokemon. So please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to the third part of the show, where, as promised, we have a very special segment today to discuss something that's near and dear to all three of our hearts, which is Pokemon, of course. And we are joined by our dear friend and listener mail writer from last episode, Mike. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you guys. I'm really honored that you guys let me be on the show, and I'm hoping I can have some good input and as a I don't know, a Pokemon expert, you might say. I
Michael,
feel
you're
like
someone I would
I've,
consider. If I had to pick one person I know that's a Pokemon master in real life, it would be you, my friend. So welcome to
well,
the show. We're glad to have you.
well, thank you. I really appreciate it, guys. So let's
Yeah.
go.
As you know, last time you wrote a question in, and I think I'm just going to reread your listener mail question from last week to kind of spark the conversation. You wrote, as loyal fans of the franchise, what do you feel? Do you feel like Nintendo and Game Freak have done Pokemon games justice in the last decade? Where do you think they've struggled, and what have they done well? And yeah, Mike, what do you think?
So, in short, I don't think that Pokemon has done the series justice for Nintendo and Game Freak. They've both really struggled to adapt to the new culture of video games. Um, for me, I've played since the very beginning, since Pokemon Red and Blue, all the way up to Sword and Shield. And I know we're just going back to like 2010, and I think that's Black and White. Um,
Yeah, well, Heart Gold, Soul
and
Silver as well,
no,
if you
Heart
want to
Gold, Soul
count the
Silver too.
remakes, right? But
Of course. And after that, I'm gonna say X and Y, the sixth gen first jump into 3D, is my favorite game in the series. I think they did that really well. They brought in some new innovations. They had some throwbacks to the original Pokemon to kind of bring old fans back into the game and to let new fans kind of recognize how big the original 151 were or that they are to the old fans. But after that, they just they've tried to add gimmick after gimmick into Sun and Moon, and then Ultra Sun and Moon, which is just a carbon copy with some little story elements, and then Sword and Shield, the jump onto the Switch. They fell short in so many different places.
I think that basically sums up exactly how I feel about it. I think we had such high expectations going into Sword and Shield, especially with the idea that like it's now going to be like, not just a handheld franchise, but also an at home console franchise. I know we had a couple spin-offs on the GameCube and I think one on the Wii, but they weren't considered really like mainline games.
Hmm.
So this was like a really big opportunity for some new life to get breathed into the franchise, and I think it's not a stretch to say that most people were quite disappointed with how it ended up culminating into what Sword and Shield became.
Yeah, it's interesting though because I feel like there's two camps on it though because there's a lot of positivity around if you want to speak like Sword and Shield themselves, and I think a lot of people who maybe have missed out on Pokemon over the last little while, or maybe just got into Nintendo by getting a Switch. I think though that kind of audience is way more in love with Sword and Shield in comparison to us who have been playing the game since the 90s, and we've grown up since Red and Blue and all those games, and I think that it's the people like us that have become more and more disappointed with the franchise, right? Because if you look at it as a whole, like every new game for the most part outsells the one before it, and they're constantly selling like millions and millions of copies, like numbers that other games would just be, completely jealous of getting. So it's almost like there's two camps, right? Like the veterans and then the newcomers when it comes to Pokemon. Or at least that's kind of how I justify it in my head. And why maybe that's also why they're not really innovating too much, because they just know that there's always going to be new people jumping on every generation, and it always sells so well. Like what's the incentive for them to really expand?
And that makes sense, I guess, in like a business sense. Like it's going to make tons of money anyway, so like it's like a safe bet. But I think that is such an uninspired and like kind of a sad perspective to have on it. Like it's gonna
Oh,
sell its Pokemon, so we don't have to make it innovative or like take any risks. And like, sure, it's not necessarily incorrect, and that's definitely a valid argument. But it's just such a shame that's a valid way of looking at the franchise, because it's so near and dear to so many people's hearts, and like we want it to succeed. Like despite knowing kind of what I'm getting into when I looked at Sword and Shield and kind of even a game or two before, like I still get excited and I want to buy it and I want to have a great time, but it just doesn't capture my attention for the full span of a game, and I think it's just missing like a little bit more substance in terms of like making the game feel more modern and not just the same experience every single time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, Kate. And when you look back to Black and White, it was really the first game that started to innovate and to change the battle style itself. You think about or actually I guess it would have been third gen when they started to do double battles. That was the first
Mhm.
like change of, oh, now it's not just one Pokemon, but it's two that I need to focus on. And then in Gen 5 they created triple battles and rotation battles, which made again two totally different ways to fight your opponent. But since then, the battles themselves haven't changed at all. It's still that same rock paper scissors style. Oh, what's super effective, what's not very effective against my opponent, and how am I going to be able to just kind of power through and slam through this game as quickly as possible? And X and Y, again, they brought in Mega Evolution, which was another innovation. Sword and Shield brought in Z, or not Sword and Shield, sorry, Sun and Moon brought in Z moves, which also changed it a little bit. And then now with Sword and Shield, they have Dynamax and Gigantamax, and it all seems to be like they've just tried to stuff something in, like this is bigger and this is better and more powerful, when really they should be focusing on new story elements or new world elements that might affect the way that the game is played, as opposed to just simple gimmicks that affect the battles.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I agree. I think all the things that's like this is, the big new selling thing for the game, they ultimately don't feel like they impact the game in any significant way. Like Mega Evolutions, like yeah, it's really cool. Like it's exciting to see a new form of a Pokemon that hasn't changed for a while, or never got that like like final evolution. Like it's really exciting, but it's such a short lived excitement. Like by the time you've mega evolved a couple times or Gigantamax twice, it's like, okay, I know what this does. Like all it does is it speeds up the battle and makes it even a little bit easier to one shot whatever enemy you're fighting, which you could argue that the games are already quite easy to begin with, but it
Hmm.
doesn't fundamentally change how you approach any kind of like strategy you need to do. At least in the base games, like obviously, there's competitive Pokemon online and mod games that make it quite a bit more difficult. But for the actual base game experience, I don't feel like it's not like an extra power that I'm using strategically. It's just, well, I might as well, like Dynamax or Mega Evolve or use a Z move because like, it's the strong thing that I have at my disposal. But like, it doesn't actually make you approach the game in any significant or different way, and like the game would be the exact same game if it was not included. So they almost seem more like things that are, exciting in the marketing leading up to the game, but then really don't contribute very much.
Yeah, I can agree with that too, and especially with things like the mega evolutions and whatnot. Like to me, mega evolutions are far and away like the greatest one of these
Mhm.
inclusions when you include Z moves and Gigantamax and all that. I think Mega is
Mhm.
for sure my favorite. The problem with those extra mechanics that I have is, and maybe we can have a larger discussion about the battle system in general in a minute, because I actually think the battle system in Pokemon is the one place where I don't really want much innovation aside from new moves. I think they have other things they could work on better, but like with those other all the gimmick moves like the megas and all that, I feel like there's almost like obviously competitively they're very important, but when it comes to in game, you almost don't even need to use them because you're just so strong anyway if you know what you're doing or have any
Mhm.
kind of idea of like the type charts and all that. And it's almost one of those things where you know you're going to win anyway, so you're just kind of wasting your time watching the animation of the mega evolution. Or at least that's kind of what I get from it. Like I turn off all the animations at a certain point just because they're very repetitive, and I wish they would maybe animate the battles a bit more dynamically. Do you guys think the battle system needs to change for Pokemon?
Not necessarily. I think that the system that they have is fine. But like you said, new moves or new innovations, little tweaks might be able to make it better, but it's not necessarily the system itself. It's just the way that it's presented. And actually, one of the things that you said, James, about that you're gonna win anyways. Well, back in the day,
Yeah, you were.
you didn't know you were gonna win anyways. Like you had your rival in the first generation of games, ass face or
Yeah.
douche or whatever you wanted to call your rival.
Yeah.
And
It
at the
was
end of
Fuckhead.
the
ass
game,
face.
well,
Yeah, fuckhead.
exactly. At the end of the game, when it's you beat the Elite Four and you're like, holy crap, this guy beat me to it, and now I need to beat him again. And his Pokemon are way higher leveled than you. He's got great type synergy and all that kind of stuff, and it's actually a challenge to beat your rival. Where in new games, your rival doesn't even pick the Pokemon that's strong against yours anymore. And they
Hmm.
hold your hand through the whole game. Oh, great. You know how to use super effective moves. Here, have these 4 revives for when your Pokemon faint to
Yeah, yeah.
nobody. It's just, I
That's
don't
a
know.
good point.
I think that's a huge thing that Pokemon has done a disservice to like the original fans is that since I don't know, I guess since
Really since
X and
Black and
Y,
White, I would say. Like Black and
yeah,
White was
even
the last almost traditional Pokemon in a way, like I would argue, right? Because you want to talk about difficulty, HGSS like Heart Gold and those, they're remakes of the originals. So they do have some challenging stuff in there, especially when you get like later on in the game. And Black and White I remember having to fight N one time, like back to back with what's that old guy that was in the game? And you
Galactus?
gets us,
Ghetsis, right?
gets us.
You had to fight
Ghetsis.
N and Ghetsis back to back near the end of that game, and that was fucking hard. Like fighting those
Yeah.
guys, that was really tough. But then the second you're right, Mike, like when you get to X and Y and beyond,
Mhm.
they really begin to do the whole like not that Pokemon's ever been, the most challenging game, but and I'm not even looking for challenge when I play it personally. I just would like a little bit more. Yeah, like don't tell me exactly where to go. Don't have these characters like point you in exactly the right direction and give you 50 potions and like heal you all the time. And they really make it like you really can't get stuck or can't get lost, and almost like you can't lose in a lot of ways, and I think that's really unfortunate because there was a lot of exploration in the original kind of, if you want to count like this decade from 2010 to 2020 in comparison to like the start of Pokemon up until 2010. I would argue there's a lot more places to explore on the maps and like hidden caves and rocket hideouts where they have little puzzles you got to go through in between the gyms and little side stories like that. I feel like they've really stripped back a lot of the exploration in the newer ones.
Mhm. Yeah, like, I think Sword and Shield, it's very much like, obviously, the wild area was the big place they wanted you to explore and really, like, roam free, but the actual routes are so linear, and like there aren't those tunnels to explore, or like like the rocket hideouts are always great with those like pads that move you around on the floor. And this game just didn't have any of that. It was just, basically walk from left to right or up and down, and then you're at the next town, there's a gym, rinse and repeat. I
Yeah, and
think
there
I
was
think
no story element to the game itself. Like
yeah.
you're just going through beating these 8 gyms, and then that's the end of the game. You have a little small encounter with the first character introduced in the game, the I don't know, the coordinator of the Pokemon League tournament, whatever it is. He ends up being the bad guy. Surprise, surprise. But the evil team in Sword and Shield isn't even an evil team. They're just a fan club of another player that you end up battling against, and they don't even end up having an impact in the story going forward.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think for me the biggest problem with Pokemon, and this kind of ties into your question of like, do you think the battle system needs to be upgraded? And then also talking about exploration and story and all these things. I think my biggest problem is I need something more to keep me engaged, because for me the main draw for Pokemon is the Pokemon itself. Like I get excited about seeing the new forms. I catch a Wooloo, like what's it going to evolve into? Like that to me is obviously the biggest draw. It's the Pokemon in the
and
game.
and just to
That
intersect on that too, just to praise Pokemon for a second, I think the one place they have been really positive is I still really think they do a good job designing the actual monsters, personally.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
completely
100%
agree.
agree. I
Not to
I
cut you
think
off or
it's
anything, but I just think
still
we deserve to
strong.
praise it where we can, right? Like we do still
Yeah.
love Pokemon for all the things we're saying about it.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think the fact that that's still so strong at its core just makes it more disappointing that the game doesn't really, like, hold up to how it can use these characters. And, like, obviously the art and the design is still fantastic, so they're putting some love and dedication into it in those areas. But for me, like, once I'm partway through and I've seen all the Pokemon, I know what all of them evolve into, there's nothing that keeps me gripped. And I think that, like, going back to the combat system, obviously that's sort of what you're engaging with the most in terms of gameplay. I think it's serviceable, but it doesn't carry me through the game based on that alone. So I think maybe a more complex, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be like that much more complicated, because already, if you were to coming into it totally fresh, the type system already makes it a little bit more
It is
complicated.
complicated. We just know it like the back of our hands.
Yeah, so that's fair, but I think the actual, like, moment to moment in the fights, there's not a lot of, like, strong decision making in each battle individually. It's kind of like, do you have the right type Pokemon out? Yes, use your strongest move. Is kind of like that will carry you through the entire game, because that's all you really need to do to be successful. And I think it's a lot of, like, time where, like, my brain isn't really engaged, I'm not really strategizing, I'm just sort of, like, formulaic kind of approaching every battle in the same way. So, I don't think it's necessarily, like, bad, or it doesn't work within the context of the game, but that itself is not driving it. So, if the combat isn't driving it, it needs something else. It needs to be, have a really compelling story that I want to engage with, or there's like a mystery to solve, or there's like a strong rival that I feel like I actually have a sense of, like, competition I'm involving with. Or maybe it is an exploration kind of aspect where I really feel like I'm engaging with the world and I'm exploring and finding secrets, and those kind of I think any of those things would be enough, maybe in combination with the Pokemon, to keep me invested. But it just seems like all of those aspects are kind of too shallow to really push me through to complete the game. I think the last Pokemon game I beat, I think, was X and Y, and it was after having taken a break and just coming back to it, like, while commuting or, like, something to do on the go. Whereas the other games, like, I get partway into it and I'm really excited at the beginning, and then I just lose steam because there's nothing keeping me gripped to continue playing once I feel like I've basically experienced everything the game has to offer within the first, like, 2/3.
Yeah, no, Kate, I totally understand what you're saying, and the first couple generations we had Team Rocket, and you're like, holy, Team Rocket, like they're such an evil organization. You knew them from the shows, and
Mhm.
they just had such an impact, and everybody knows who Team Rocket is. But do you remember Team Galactic? Do you remember Team Plasma, Team Flare, and Team Skull? Like, they're nothing story elements that have no impact on the story aside from just being a minor speed bump and maybe having a tiny diversion from the game.
Right,
Um,
they're almost more of just, like, an excuse to have a couple extra battles thrown in.
Well, I
that's
feel like they're
right.
an
And
excuse to have trainers that use different types of Pokemon. You know, like they
but it's
always use the
always
Yeah.
poison
the
or the
same.
dark type, you know? I
Mhm.
think that's actually one of the things, just to my last point I had about the battle system was that I think that it's so close to being something that's really good. I think what they need to do is they just need to make the AI smarter. They need to make the trainers not have a team of 6 Pokemon all of the same type,
Right,
because
you don't wanna
you
catch
just run through them.
Bugcatcher Rick with 3 Kakunas.
Yeah, like it just doesn't make any sense. Like, because I've dabbled in some competitive Pokemon over the years. Like I used to play quite a bit back in, you know, the X and Y days, and playing the battles online and getting into playing against an opponent that's going to predict, hey, I've got a Charizard on the field and you've got a Blastoise. I know you're going to use Hydro Pump, so I'm going to switch into a different type of Pokemon. Like that, just that mindset and kind of predicting what the other people are going to do and having an intelligent opponent makes it completely different than if you're just battling a guy who will never switch out. You have the super effective, you know, counter to his
Mhm.
team, and you can just run through, like you said, and click your strongest move. Like, to me, that's the change they need to make. Is if it was the exact same game, but if they just worked on the AI and made them more intelligent, I feel like that would fix a lot of the problems with Pokemon. I think it would allow people to forgive maybe the more linear story or the more linear maps if they had the battle system that was way more challenging and engaging, and you couldn't just hammer A to get through it.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that's one thing that Pokemon has done really well in these newer generations of games is they've catered a lot to that competitive meta game, the the game outside of the game, which is playing competitively against other players, and not just that in itself, but the ability to do so by making the breeding system um, and the making of competitive Pokemon a lot easier in game, so you don't need to hack Pokemon into games like people used to do in the past. Um, I've done it a little bit. Like I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I started breeding a little bit in X and Y, and it was a pain in the ass. There was no good way to do it to check and make sure your IVs were good. But now it's so easy. You just need to do one little thing in the battle tower in Sword and Shield, and then you have all the IVs unlocked. And they've just made that portion of the game so much more accessible to newer players that maybe want to dip their toes into that competitive scene.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I'm with you. I completely commend them for, you know, finally improving that kind of thing, because Pokemon has had, you know, an online competitive community really since like the DS days, and I think that's one of the biggest flaws of the franchise. If you want to talk about like the last decade, is just how long it's taken them to come around to the having a decent online service. Like it's still not even great. You still need friend codes. You still need to go through all this BS of like matching up, and it's, I mean, the functionality of like the wild areas isn't as good as it needs to be. But I'm glad they're finally making that effort to at least modernize it a bit in that way, because over the decade, like Nintendo's like, hey, you know, we've got this great competitive game. There's a lot of strategy, there's big world tournaments and everything, but God forbid you want to participate unless you put 100 hours into breeding, and we won't let you hack it either because we're Nintendo and we have like the strictest, you know, anti-piracy laws around. So we're basically forcing you that if you want to engage with what is, you know, a lot of people would argue the coolest part of Pokemon, you have to do all this back end work. And even like the change they made in Sword and Shield, sure, it's easier, but like why not just put a mode in where you can literally pick any Pokemon that you've caught and customize its stats right there and just make a team like in Pokemon Stadium or something. Like that would be such a cool game to have. And I feel like they're just wasting a lot of potential by not including that kind of thing and making it even more accessible.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It really feels like, playing competitively on online and in those ways is so distinct and, like, separate from playing
It's a completely different
the
game.
actual single player campaign. Like, it's totally different, and, like, the average person, I would say, who's, buying the Pokemon games isn't engaging with it in that way, and that's fine if it's a bit more of a niche thing, and it's definitely good they've made it a lot less tedious, because I think that's definitely what would have been the best way to describe it in the past, and that tedium put a lot of people off of, giving it a shot. But it is really interesting that like even though they're making it much more accessible or easier or you know at least removing part of the barrier, it still very much feels like it's not necessarily being encouraged by the main game and like it's it doesn't really it feels like there's a disconnect still and I think that's kind of weird because Pokemon is typically thought of as such a social thing and I guess maybe that's exemplified a little bit more with like Pokemon Go and some of the like extra additional games and but like even in all the trailers for the games it's always like trade Pokemon with your friends, play with your friends and like do the wild area with you can see your friends and like they're really promoting it to be a social game but then the game doesn't really feel like it's intended to play very socially when you actually get into it and it still makes you even though it's easier it still makes you jump through a lot of hoops to kind of
Hmm.
access
Hmm.
a lot
Well,
of a lot of those aspects.
yeah, I would. I mean, I would forgive Game Freak a little bit for that, just because the Switch's online infrastructure in general is just so terrible that it's like they're kind of working with bad technology anyway. But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they could easily streamline it a lot more.
Yeah, have you guys played Sword and Shield online at all, or have you been into the wild area?
I haven't seen it since the
Yes.
very start, so I don't know if it's improved or not. Have you tried it out, Mike? Or
It's still not in the last couple of months since the DLCs have come out. I haven't actually played the DLC. I might at some point, but I remember going into it, flicking the online on, and then immediately a bunch of people just kind of like materialize into your game, and it drops to like 2 frames per second. It's absolutely ridiculous.
wow. Okay, guys. Well, we're getting a little bit close to time here, so I just wanted to bring up one more talking point before we kind of close it out, which is this. It seems to me like every single year they do. There's obviously a Pokemon game every year, right? Like since 2010, we've had something every single year, with the exception, I think, of 2015, if I'm correct.
Wow.
Anyone knows?
Wow.
Either
But
way, yeah, we've had something every year. So judging by the pattern, it looks like 2021 will be potentially a remake year, right? There's lots of rumors going around about like Let's Go Johto, or about like a Gen 4 remake, which is Diamond Pearl Platinum remade into the future, which is like the next one they got to go into. So I just wanted to ask you guys off the top of your head, which of those would you prefer, and what do you hope to see in that game that would make you actually excited if you could pick like one thing for them to really improve?
I guess I'll go first with this one. I definitely want to see the Diamond and Pearl remake. That world is so vast in the original games that I think having that already created map and the textures and everything already in like a format for the game itself, they they can't possibly screw it up to the point where it's going to be an empty world like the wild area in Sword and Shield. So I'm super excited for that to come out. I just want to see what they're going to do with all the snowy areas and all the water portions, the big mountain. There's so much potential for that, and I'm hoping and praying that it's going to be as good as I want it to be.
um yeah, I'm gonna go I wanna go with the bonus option C, Pokemon Snap.
Oh, that's coming out for
That
sure. That's coming out already. That's cheating.
yeah, exactly. But that wasn't your question and that's cheating.
I mean, if we're
So
cheating, I'm gonna pick Pokemon Coliseum or Pokemon Stadium.
that's true. But yeah, we'll stick to your question and be fair. So I'll also say Diamond and Pearl. I don't know if I personally would pick it up. But I know that it's something that the community has been asking for and is very passionate about. And with their trend of all the remakes, that it is the logical next step. And I think doing something like that is a lot more interesting or worthwhile than picking up another Gen 1 or like another Gen 1 is fantastic and I we're all nostalgic for it, but I think giving Diamond and Pearl a little bit more love and another stage to express themselves or for people who missed it to play, I think that's great. But I think if it's just a direct and faithful remake, I don't know personally if I would go back and play it again.
See, that's interesting because my answer, I'm gonna go for the hat trick, is also Diamond and Pearl remake. Um, Although I did enjoy Let's Go, but it's interesting you say that you wouldn't go back just for like a remake, because my answer to the question is literally I want a remake of Diamond and Pearl, like just the same game but modernized, and keep a lot of the things. Like I want them to keep a lot of the modernizations. Like do not put the HMs back in, replace them with the the rideable Pokemon. I want to be able to change my party out on the fly without having to go back to the Pokemon Center, because Pokemon's the only game in the world where you can't just switch your party around so easily until Sword and Shield, at least. But I just want to see like a really polished Diamond and Pearl version, with all that modernized stuff. And I would, like I said before, I would just love to see the AI get improved a little bit more than anything else. Just so the battles weren't so easy, because if they remade Diamond and Pearl, they already have a pretty good story. Like you said, Mike, they have a cool map. Like Diamond and Pearl, I think, is one of the coolest regions that they've done, right? It's just that the original game is quite slow in terms of like the experience bars and some of the animations take a long time. But if they streamlined it, made it quicker, because that's one thing they did do really well in Sword and Shield, I think, is like, it moves a lot faster as a game. Like you menu a lot faster, you get through things a lot quicker.
The pacing was nice.
Yeah, I would just like to see that, like Diamond and Pearl modernized in that way.
Yeah, have you ever killed a Blissey in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl? It takes
2
about
hours
about an
later.
hour.
Look, if you kill a Blissey in Diamond and Pearl, you're gonna kill the battery on your DS before it finishes the experience part.
Like it's just ridiculous.
Yes.
Any final thoughts about Pokemon, guys?
I just hope you're right, James, about the remake of the Diamond and Pearl remake. I hope it's good. And if a Let's Go Johto comes out, I hope it's similar to what Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was, because as simple as that game was, it actually showed off the hardware of the Switch so much better than Sword and Shield. All of it was very faithful to the original, and I personally loved it as an easy update to the original games.
Actually, just to touch on that quick before we end, I think one of the strongest points about Let's Go was that the Pokemon were always running around on the map, and they got rid of the random encounters, which is, I was really skeptical of that before playing it, but after going into that game, it makes it so much more streamlined, because if you're looking for a certain Pokemon that's really rare, you cut out all that time of like, okay, running in the grass. Okay, a battle's coming. Wait for it to load. Okay, the Pokemon's sliding across the screen. It's a Pidgey again. Like, fuck this. I've on 15 Pidgeys, I'm looking for this rare one, And whereas in Let's Go, you can just run around, look for the guy you're looking for. Yeah. Sure, it could take a while, but it's a lot faster.
And also, I think it's just more enjoyable to run around in a world that really feels like it's populated and filled with Pokemon, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, that's kind of what we're here for, right? It's like, at the end of the day, it's about the creatures, it's about the Pokemon, and, seeing your favorite Pokemon is really exciting, just even if you don't intend to catch it or initiate that battle, even if you're intentionally trying to skip them. It's like, oh, cool, there's like, we're on Wooper Watch, there's Wooper running around over there, that's great.
Hey, Mike, did you get on Wooper Watch last night? You're a Pokemon Go guy still, right?
I did notice it. Unfortunately, I was at work when it happened. So all of a sudden I come out of work and I just flick it on to see what's around. There's like 20 Wooper around. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then the little notification pops up. It's like, here's Wooper Watch. Like, try to get a shiny Wooper. And of course, I'm, I love my shiny Pokemon. I've just got to get them. Didn't get lucky, but probably checked like 150 Wooper. And
holy shit! You checked 150. You didn't find one?
No luck. Well, the odds are like, I think the odds in Pokemon Go are like 1 in 450 just normally, which is way better than the base games. But
do you know?
Have you
I'll admit
ever
something to you guys.
Found a shiny Pokemon?
I'll admit something to you guys. I found one shiny Pokemon, and it was in a ROM, like a emulator version. It wasn't even in a real game.
That shiny Spiritomb, I remember that, James. That's funny.
That's ridiculous.
Is it? My only one was ever in a ROM too. It was Pokemon Ruby. I'm playing on my laptop, and it was a Makuhita, and it's one of the crappiest shinies because the only difference is it has different colored gloves.
Yep.
I was like, oh, but I caught it and used it because like that's the rules. But
pretty much that's the rule, yeah. But I've caught a few, and I've delved a bit into like actual traditional shiny hunting, like in the original games, and it's so tedious. Like, don't do it, guys. Don't do it.
You know what? I have actually one other thing to ask for Game Freak. Please stop making just green shinies. They never.
What is it with like? it's like puke green or teal.
Yeah, what's up with that puke green? Like that, like every third shiny is like that. Please don't. Nobody wants it.
You mean After a purple Dratini and a purple Dragonair, you don't want a vomit green Dragonite? Are you sure?
Right? Like, why?
Yeah.
Stop.
Hey guys, well, since we mentioned the
So-
color vomit green, I'd like to move into listener mail.
Ooh, it's kind of relevant
It's
for
a
this
good
one. I
transition.
don't like that.
What's the question, Kate?
Okay, let me ask you. We've got I quite like this one. It's a nice lighthearted fun question. So this one's coming to us from Matthias and he wants to know if each console is a flavor, drink or some kind of a food dish, what would they all be? So I'm going to interpret this as like I guess maybe Xbox,
Yeah,
PlayStation and Switch, I
that's
guess
right. Yeah.
those three.
I think so. Yeah, PS5, Xbox, and like the new Xbox Series S and X and Switch. So,
Mhm.
Mike, why don't you're the guest, man? Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so James, you actually kind of told me what the question was just so I could think
Well,
about it briefly.
Yeah,
Just
we do a
just
little
in
bit of
advance.
preparation,
So,
you know.
well, of course, and again, I didn't think too hard about it, but the way that I look at it, I look at the Switch and I see the blue Joy-Con and the red or orange or whatever color the other side is, and all I can think about is a big giant plate of jelly beans. And it makes sense to me because Nintendo games, they're so sweet, and or most of them are, the originals are so sweet and lighthearted, and it just reminds me just picking jelly beans up out of a little bowl and just eating my brightly colored jelly beans.
Nice.
So that's what the
You
Switch
know
is
what?
like for me.
Let's do this fun. Let's do all of our Switch, and then we'll go around and one console at a time. Kate, what's your Switch?
Okay, well, I like your idea, but mine only kind of work together as like a set. I picked a theme unintentionally and then stuck with this really dumb theme. So my answers will be shit, and then maybe they'll be good. If we do PlayStation last, my answers will have like a cool, fun reveal of where it all started.
You got it. You got it.
So we'll set the stage, make some drama a little bit. Mine actually, also kind of, I guess, were Joy-Con color inspired. I like your jelly beans actually, perhaps better than mine, but I went with raspberries, because you get like the red raspberries and then blue raspberries a thing. I don't know why that's just a flavor that we've decided exists, but like blue raspberries a thing. So you got the two colors, and then they're like a good on the go food. You like have some raspberries and you take them with you and you go somewhere and it's always just wonderful.
I like
Excellent.
it. I like it. I'm thinking
that
along the
sounds
same
good,
lines
yeah.
too. Yeah. I'm gonna complete the dessert trifecta with the Switch being a cupcake, guys. And I think that just because I didn't go for the colors, but it's kind of small. It's bite sized. It's delicious. You know, everyone likes it. There's no one that dislikes
Mhm.
the Switch. And for me, I play a lot of mostly indie games on there, so it's like small bite sized stuff, just like cupcakes. Not gonna fill you up, but it's it's a nice little treat. Mike, what about you for Xbox?
So can we do PlayStation first, or do you guys want to do Xbox
Oh,
first?
you know what? It's been decided. Xbox first.
Okay, Xbox first. All right, so Xbox for me, and I think about the roots of Xbox and it being a Microsoft company, probably one of the most valuable companies in the world, owned
Oh
by
yeah.
Bill Gates and all that stuff. So I think about about Microsoft and Xbox as going to a really fancy sit down restaurant, ordering a meal that's like $55 or $60, and then you're just getting this tiny little portion of food that doesn't quite fill you up.
But I bet it looks amazing. Like
Oh, it
it's got
looks
some
great.
like drizzle all over
Yeah.
it.
Like that high end vinaigrette.
Yeah, it's like
Exactly.
it's kind of
Yeah.
like been piled on top, so it's just one little like it's taking up like 5% of the real estate of the plate.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm saying that obviously biased as someone that's played PlayStation forever since the original and have never played an Xbox 360 whatever. Um
Have you
but
never played a game on
that's just what it
360?
seems like to me. No, I haven't.
Oh,
Like
Huh.
other than maybe like playing Halo or something
yeah. Okay.
back as a kid at someone's
Okay.
house.
I didn't know
I
if you were
guess
being
we
literal
were
or
there.
not. I was like, holy shit.
No, yeah,
Whoa.
yeah, literally.
Wow.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was a really well thought out answer, and I'm gonna reveal myself now as just the asshole that just you went with something really dumb that I thought was funny. But I will reveal now that mine are all fruit themed, and I don't know if you've guys seen, but the Xbox has that meme where like the PlayStation was like a bunch of different things. It was
It
like
was set of
Kaiba. It was
Kaiba,
like
yeah.
yeah, it was Kaiba. It was like your air conditioning unit. It was everything. But the Xbox had potentially the greatest one where like you guys seen Into the Spider-Verse and the
Yes.
villain, what is his name? I'm blanking on it.
The villain in
Um
Spider-Verse? Oh my god, why don't I
yeah.
remember this
What's his
plot
name?
now?
Kingpin. Kingpin, there we go. And he's just massive. Like, they committed to him being, like, ridiculously and, like, unproportionately, like, just gargantuan with, like, the biggest shoulders, and he's always wearing that black suit, and someone put a little, like, sticker of his face on the Xbox, and it was, like, just, like, the perfect kind of, like, refrigerator shape as, like, his body, and so I always think of him, and I always think of it as being, like, this big chunky console, even though the PlayStation's probably, like,
It is
bigger
bigger,
in a
much bigger.
ridiculous way, but I think of it kind of being, like, this, like, wide kind of, like, big, like, hulking thing. So, I picked it as a watermelon.
It's green.
'Cause it's like it's gotta be the big, like, chunky, like, wide fruit and, like, it's Xbox green, so I've degraded myself by following Mike up with a watermelon.
I love
I
these
like it. It's
interpretations,
cute.
man. Everyone's interpretation is so much different. For me, I went with a bit of a different perspective. I thought like Xbox really has changed its branding and kind of what it's trying to be ever since the end of last generation, kind of last few years with Game Pass, and it's really building up a lot of goodwill and doing a lot of customer first moves
Mhm.
in like business wise, so giving a lot of stuff for free, Game Pass stuff like that. So I put Xbox as pizza because just everyone likes pizza, right? There's a kind of
Mhm.
pizza for everyone, just the same way that if you get an Xbox and you get Game Pass, sure, you're not getting like a lot of exclusive humongous Xbox titles, but you're getting a huge range of indie titles and like AAA third party titles. You're gonna find something no matter who you are, any person, whether they're a new gamer or someone that's been playing games for years. So I think Xbox is pizza.
Mm,
That's interesting, actually. When
I
you
like
when you
that.
were saying when you were saying that it kind of does that whole Game Pass thing where you just need to apply to the subscription and you
Yeah,
get all these
it's
games.
amazing, man.
I thought you were gonna go with like an all you can eat buffet because you
Oh,
just
that's
pay
even
Oh,
your
better.
you
buffet
pay
would've
your
been
admission
really
fee,
good.
and then you can just go in on whatever they have at the buffet.
Can I amend my answer?
If you sure.
I think Mike gets credit for that one.
The thing that's a technicality though, because technically a buffet is not a food type; it's a place where you get food.
All
Right.
right,
You know what
fair
I mean?
enough.
Okay.
Anyway, Michael, finish us off. What's the PlayStation?
All right, PlayStation for me. Go over to your mom or dad's house, and you get a home cooked like steak and potatoes meal. It's just everything that you need to fill you up. It's home cooked comfort food, um, just from the original PlayStation all the way up to the PlayStation 5. It's always going to be that food that just makes you feel at home.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Aw, I felt that right in my heart.
We're here for the feels. Here for the feels.
Okay, well, this is where my fruit started, and I'm gonna give this the nice 50% of where this fruit came into it. And this is a fruit that's particularly eaten in the morning, I think, because for me, one of my favorite things to do on like a weekend or like a day off is to get up in the morning, be kind of sleepy, maybe still, go curl up on my couch with a cup of coffee and sit down and play my PlayStation. And that's how I think about it most fondly in the morning. So we needed a morning fruit. And it also kind of looks it's really tall and it sort of looks kind of dumb with back to the binder analogy of like there being like the fruit in the middle and then the sides getting like peeled away. So it is a banana. Cuz like the way it looks, it's got like the PlayStation's like the black part in the middle and then you like peel
I got it.
the white banana bits off the side
I really appreciate how
and
literally you took like the appearance of each of these
Right.
consoles.
You need to make that a meme now as a
right?
banana inside, but please don't eat a black banana.
Please don't eat the PlayStation. But please do release a white and yellow version of the
Please do.
console. That
Are
is
there
exactly what it will look like.
are there bananas in Bugsnax, guys?
Not that I've seen, actually. No.
I don't know, that might be like a late game hidden bug.
Well, the closest is there's a
Bug.
hot dog bug that's like kind of the same thing. The PlayStation could be the
Oh,
weenie,
hot dogs.
Yeah, could be a
the
hot
button
dog.
there. But so for mine, guys, I went with a bit of a different perspective. It's not the appearance of the console, but rather the experiences on it. And to me, the reason
Mhm.
that I love PlayStation so much, and I think we can all agree on it, is they just have this incredible party selection of titles with like incredible exclusives. All the ones we could list forever and ever. And so to me, PlayStation is like a high-end steak meal where you're really playing like the premium, the best games you can possibly get, in my opinion, anyway. And so like it's like getting a nice fancy steak. You're going to sit down and play something real good. And then of course you have like the smaller stuff on it too, which can be like the side dishes, potatoes and veggies and corn on the cob stuff. But it's all about that big meat, the medium rare steak, like the exclusive games.
Mm.
That sounds fantastic. I'm
And
gonna
now
go eat my PlayStation now.
Right.
Not recommended, but I mean, I can't. Once we hang up this, this chat, I can't stop you, Mike. So it's been if you do that, it's been nice knowing you.
Well, perfect.
And thank you again, Mike, for joining us on this show. It's been a pleasure having you as a guest and our first ever guest on the show again. So thank you very much. You never know, maybe you'll make an appearance again someday.
Well, thank you guys so much. And I know that Kate and I talked earlier about something a little bit different. Not going to reveal anything, but I'm absolutely so honored to be on your guys' show. Like, I was a little slow on the uptake starting to listen to your podcast, but I binged through it in like a 3-week span, all of your 18 or 19 episodes. And you guys are doing a great job, and I couldn't be happier to help you guys out with this episode.
Hey, thanks, man. We'll spread the good word, hey?
Absolutely.
Well, if you've been listening to us like Michael has, you can get in touch with us over at CANDS Pod on Twitter. And if you check that out, we've got a convenient little link right at the top. It's called a link tree. And if you click on that, it's got a little box that comes up, and you can find our show in so many different places. I encourage you to look at it, click your favorite, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give us the views. It's all good. If you enjoy the show, thank you so much. Michael, again, thanks for joining us. And Kate, we'll be back again in a couple weeks to discuss, I think, our Game of the Year stuff, right? We got some Game of the Year plans coming up for like a personal award show. Just as a spoiler, so look forward to that, and we'll see you guys again in a couple weeks. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show, Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.